Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel, and today I'm going to be counting down every Pink Floyd studio album from worst to best. There are 15 studio albums in the Pink Floyd catalog that I'm going to be counting down here today, and, I own 10 out of the 15, but I'm going to start here with my least favorite one that I don't currently own. That's 1969's Ummagumma. It's half a studio album and half a live album, and just my least favorite by a long shot in the Pink Floyd catalog. I mean, the live stuff is okay. You've got a great live rendition of Careful What That Axe Eugene, but aside from that, this album is just an embarrassment for the band, in my opinion, especially the studio tracks, which are really, really weak, in my opinion, and, the band have looked down on it very much so since its release, now in hindsight, and have considered it to be a total disaster and a misfire on their end, and, yeah, I totally agree with that. This is 1969, before Floyd had really become Pink Floyd, the kind that we all know and love to this day, but, when it comes to, early Pink Floyd, this is certainly some of their worst material, and definitely not an album that I gravitate towards. I don't currently own it. I'm sure I'll pick it up in the future, but when it comes to, the material on here, just really not my thing, not a big fan of it, and not something I listen to all that often. Coming in at number 14, I'm going to go with The Endless River from 2017, the final Pink Floyd studio album, consisting mostly of, instrumental or ambient music, most of which was recorded and written during the Division Bell sessions back in 1994, and then, of course, there's some additional material written by Gilmour from 2013 and 2014 on this record, but, when it comes to, looking at this album in the grand scheme of things and the entire Pink Floyd catalog, it's not an album I gravitate towards all that much. To say something nice about it, it's good thinking music, good relaxing music as well, right? Good for sleeping or just, relaxing your mind, stuff like that, but not very memorable here in my opinion. Most tracks, like I said, are instrumental. I believe only one song on here has lead vocals on it, that being Louder Than Words, so not a great record here in my opinion, and not a very memorable album for the band to go out on, that being The Endless River from 2017, my number 14 here on the list. Next to number 13 now, I'm going to go with More, also from 1969, so pretty rough year in 1969 for the band, seeing them release both More and Ummagumma. Now, More is the third studio album in their catalog, and the first soundtrack they would release as well. It's the first without Syd Barrett in the group, who had departed the band earlier due to some mental issues, right? But, this seems to be the band, and I wouldn't say they're lost at this point, but definitely composing some weird experimental music that really does not reflect the classic Floyd sound that we would all know and love very, shortly later. But in this period of time here, the band are just experimenting with a lot of different progressive elements as well as psychedelic elements here. So it's pretty interesting, from that standpoint. And the band were kind of at a crossroads, but the material reflected is just not all that great in my opinion. Got some interesting instrumentals on here, but just in general, not a very memorable album. And another one that I don't own, but I'm sure I'll pick up in the future. Just a pretty weak album here by Floyd in 1969. Next, at number 12, I'm going to go with Saucerful Of Secrets, their sophomore studio album here, and the final with Syd Barrett in the group, who would depart the band before the completion of this record, marking the debut of David Gilmour on a Pink Floyd studio album. And so definitely a really interesting turning point here in the band's history, in sense of interesting lineup changes going on here. Syd would be on his way out, but I always considered Syd Barrett to be a sonic genius, somebody who really understood psychedelic rock. So there are a lot of really interesting tracks on here in my opinion, like Let There Be More Light, Remember a Day, Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, great Roger Waters track there, and then of course you have Saucerful of Secrets, a great psychedelic piece as the title track. So really strong album, again, not top shelf Floyd here. I think the band were still trying to figure themselves out at this point, and we're still a ways away from, prime classic Pink Floyd, but nevertheless, a really solid sophomore effort here by the band, and the final with Syd Barrett in the group. Coming in at number 12 here, gotta go with Saucerful of Secrets. Next, at number 11, I'm gonna go with A Momentary Lapse of Reason from 1987, and I'm sorry, this might be an unpopular opinion, but this is a 3-song album in my opinion. You have Learning to Fly, Sorrow, and On the Turning Away, and aside from that, nothing really on this album is all that memorable to me. When it comes to, post-Roger Waters era Pink Floyd, it's very hit or miss with me. Obviously, David Gilmour is brilliant, has a great mind for music, but just didn't write lyrics as interestingly as Roger Waters did, so the material kind of comes off as paint-by-numbers Pink Floyd, like I've said in the past, and I do feel that way about A Momentary Lapse of Reason. Definitely not a bad album, but just very average in the Pink Floyd catalog, very cookie-cutter, and just pretty generic Pink Floyd here by the band without Roger Waters in this post-Waters era. So both released in 1987 were A Momentary Lapse of Reason and Radio Chaos, and for me, I just prefer Radio Chaos by Roger Waters. So, just really not a great record here in my opinion, and not one that I listen to all that much. Their debut from 1967 is one of the best psychedelic rock debuts of all time, in my opinion. And kick us off in the top 10, I gotta go with Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Really, really strong album here, spearheaded by Syd Barrett, who was still the frontman of the group at this point, still the band's lyrical leader and thematic elements leader here before Roger Waters would take over in that department. But, you know, Syd was definitely one of those people who really got psychedelic rock and was able to, you know, really make his mark in a short period of time, I think, even though his career would be cut short, unfortunately. But on this album, there's a lot of great songs, in my opinion, like Astronomy Don't Mind, Lucifer Sam, right, Flaming, right, you have Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk, you have Interstellar Overdrive. There's a lot of really interesting tracks on here, right, definitely some great psychedelic rock pieces here that I really enjoy. So when it comes to some of the best psychedelic rock in the Pink Floyd catalog from those early years with Syd Barrett, you really need to look at Piper at the Gates of Dawn, my number 10 here on the list. Number 9, let's go with The Division Bell from 1994. You know, not a bad album, definitely an improvement from Momentary, Lapse of Reason. This, of course, being the second album without Roger Waters in the group. But, I mean, when Roger left the band, so much left with him, I think. Just Pink Floyd without Roger Waters just kind of felt lifeless, I think. And again, the lyrics are very much generic, paint-by-numbers Pink Floyd. So for the same reasons that I don't love A Momentary Lapse in Reason, I really don't love The Division Bell. But it's still a decent album here, right? You have Cluster 1, What Do You Want From Me, Marooned, A Great Day for Freedom, Lost for Words, and High Hopes. So definitely some more standout, enjoyable tracks on here than on A Momentary Lapse of Reason. So it's a much stronger record, but still not great, in my opinion, when it comes to, you know, everything in the Pink Floyd catalog. We're now past the prime years of the band, which is pretty unfortunate. But considering Roger had left the group almost 10 years ago at this point, it's just not a great album, in my opinion, but still pretty solid for what it is. And what it is, you know, post-Roger Waters era Pink Floyd, which, like I said before, is pretty hit or miss for me. Pink Floyd would follow up the release of Meddle with my number 8 here on the list, Obscured by Clouds from 1972. Now, we're now in prime Pink Floyd era here throughout the 70s, just releasing great album after great album here. And while Obscured by Clouds is not nearly as strong as some of the other records they released in the 70s, it's still a really fun record here, in my opinion. Heavily acoustic driven, I think, but a lot of really strong tracks on here, like Obscured by Clouds, When You're In, Burning Bridges, What's the Deal, Mudmen, Childhood's End is great, and absolutely Curtains to close things out. I really dig this record. I think it's a great, relaxing album, and, you know, while it's not as strong as Meddle, definitely carrying over some of the same instrumentation onto Meddle, from Meddle onto Obscured by Clouds, mixed with the acoustic sound, makes for a really interesting album here, in my opinion. So definitely belongs in the top 10 as far as I'm concerned. From 1972, coming in at number 8, we have Obscured by Clouds. Pink Floyd would kick off the best decade of their careers in 1970 with a pretty weird album in Atom Heart Mother, but a great album nonetheless. You know, I think when you look at this album and its place in the Pink Floyd catalog, it marks a major turning point for the band here as they begun to get a bit more serious, I think, and a bit more focused in their efforts in the studio. Great mix of progressive rock and experimental, right? You've got some great experimentation on here. Atom Heart Mother, the title track, is a great piece. Just all parts of them, I think, are really interesting. You have If, which is a really underrated Roger Waters track. Obviously, lyrically not as strong as some of the lyrics to be writing later on in the 70s, but nonetheless, really underrated stuff there. Summer 68, Fat Old Son, and then Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast is interesting, to say the least, to close out the album. So, in general here, it's a weird, different album, but I think it's classic for a reason. An album that the band are not huge fans of, but for me, it's grown on me quite a bit. That's why it's my number 7 here on the list. From 1970, gotta go with Atom Heart Mother. Following that up now with my number 6, we're gonna go with the criminally underrated Final Cut from 1983, the last Pink Floyd album with Roger Waters in the group. He would depart due to creative differences soon after, but a fantastic record here, in my opinion. So overlooked in their catalog, and obviously any album following up The Wall is going to be overshadowed, which is understandable, but it's such a great record here, in my opinion, and one that gets so, just, you know, it's always down towards the bottom of people's rankings of their catalog, and I don't understand why. Looking at the track listing here, right, you have A Post-War Dream, Your Possible Pasts, The Hero's Return, The Gunner's Dream, Paranoid Eyes, The Fletcher Memorial Home is great, The Final Cut, Not Now John, and Two Suns in the Sunset. Every song on here is fantastic, in my opinion, and features some of Roger Waters' best lyrics, in my opinion. Just really fantastic lyricism here on this album, and the only way it could have been better had, you know, the band themselves fully been involved with the record. But at this point, Roger had become really controlling, and, you know, Roger is going to be Roger. He controlled just about every aspect of this record here and didn't let the rest of the band have all that much input. So I think had this been a more of a band-focused effort, this could have been an even better album, maybe even cracked the top 5, but considering the band are pretty much shut out, aside from a few David Gilmour guitar solos here and there that are really solid. It's just not a band effort in my opinion, but nevertheless, it's more of a Roger Waters solo project, and for that, I think it's really, really strong and definitely belongs somewhere in the top 10. I'd put it in the top 6 here, as it's my number 6 on the list. Really underrated, and an album that a lot of people hate on, and I just don't get the hate for. Really strong stuff on here, like I said, and I really enjoy it, even though I recognize that it's not a full band effort. Breaking into the top 5 here with Meddle from 1971. Here's an album that will probably always be in the shadow somewhat of the big four in their catalog, which I'll get to in a bit here throughout the 70s, but from 1971, this incredible album definitely should be commended for its excellent instrumentation and great atmospheric vibe throughout. You know, so many great songs on here, like One of These Days, which has a great Roger Waters bass line, A Pillow of Winds, Fearless, Saint-Tropez is a great Roger Waters deep cut as well, Seamus, That's the Dog, and then Echoes, right, the epic album closer here, 26 minutes long. It doesn't feel like 20 minutes in my opinion, right? It's a great song, and time seems to fly when listening to it. Just the instrumentation on there is so fantastic, and I really enjoy it. One of those records that I could just listen to from top to bottom over and over again is Meddle. Not a single skippable track here in my opinion, and definitely belongs in the top 5. Coming in at number 5 here, I gotta go with 1971's Meddle. Now, this is where it gets really difficult, because I really didn't want to rank any of these albums higher than the big four in the Pink Floyd catalog, and they're all fantastic. I think, you know, any band could make one of these records and hang their entire careers on that album, and yet the band made 4 classic albums, just one after another, and they're all incredible, and, you know, to see the creative growth of the band throughout these records is just incredible, you know. But that said, there has to be a ranking here. Some need to be ranked higher than others, so coming in at number 4, I'm going to go with Animals. Just another great album here, a classic for a reason. You know, I did enjoy the 2018 remix that was released in 2022, go figure, but I think the original is much better, and looking at the track listing here, Dogs is an excellent track, right? 18 minutes long, flies by, but the instrumentation there is incredible. Got some great work by David Gilmour. Pigs, 3 different ones. Sheep, Pigs on the Wing 2, and then Pigs on the Wing 1, which was the album opener, so kind of gets bookended there by Pigs on the Wing. Really, really great album here by the band. Just incredible stuff, and it does see Roger Waters' lyrics moving in a more political direction, which he would go on to, you know, do for the rest of his career up until now, so that's definitely interesting and something worth noting. But the band here with a great album, one of the all-time best in Animals, which only number 4 on the list, but should go to show how strong my top 3 is. This pains me because this was my introduction to the band, and, you know, it's, in my opinion, the greatest concept album ever. That's got to be The Wall, coming in at number 3. I'd love to put it higher, but again, the big 4 in their catalog are just so hard to rank, and The Wall is fantastic, but not a full band effort, as, you know, Roger was being very controlling at this point. Wrote pretty much everything on this album, right? Wanted himself to be the sole contributor to the record, and of course, I believe it didn't go that way entirely, but more or less, he had contributed most of the writing on this record, and it's definitely Roger Waters' masterpiece, no doubt about it. But an incredible record here by the band. Yeah, In the Flesh, The Thin Ice, all 3 parts of Another Brick in the Wall, and I will say one of my unpopular Pink Floyd opinions is that I think Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 is very overrated, and for me personally, I think Part 3 is the best. But you also have Mother, Goodbye Blue Sky, Empty Spaces, Young Lust, Don't Leave Me Now, Goodbye Cruel World, Hey You, Nobody Home, Vera, Bring the Boys Back Home, Comfortably Numb, of course, probably the band's best known track with that amazing Gilmour guitar solo. In the Flesh Part 2, Run Like Hell, Waiting for the Worms, The Trial, and Outside the Wall. Just every song in here advances the story so well, and there are so many different thematic elements you could pick up on the story and trace them throughout, and that's what makes it such a great concept album in my opinion. And the fact that this was written back in 1979 and still holds up to this day is very impressive. It feels just as relevant now as it did back in the day, and just such an incredible record here by the band. Roger Waters writing what is, in my opinion, like I said, his masterpiece in The Wall. Unfortunately, only my number 3 on the list, because again, there are just so many great albums to choose from here, and, you know, even though this order could change depending on the day you ask me, right now I gotta say that there are 2 more that are stronger in the Pink Floyd catalog. Turning 50 this year in 2023, we have Dark Side of the Moon, and I mean, really, what could I possibly say about Dark Side of the Moon that has not been said already? Just an absolute masterpiece here from start to finish. So many great songs, and each song needs to be listened to in the order in which it was intended here. Should not be shuffled whatsoever. The track listing is perfect the way it is. Every song is incredible, right? You have Speak to Me, Breathe, Time, Great Gig in the Sky, Eclipse, Us and Them, right? Just so many great songs on here. Brain Damage as well. Just from top to bottom here, this this album is fantastic and tells a really interesting story, you know, sonically throughout. So for that reason, I love this album to death. But in my opinion, there's one album that's stronger. I'm sure you guys know what that is already. But there are just a few things that you should not do with this album, right? You should not listen to it out of order. You should not listen to it on shuffle. And you should not re-record it without the rest of the band like what Roger Waters is doing. I don't know why he decided to re-record Dark Side of the Moon. He can only ruin it. But in my opinion, the original is just fantastic and some of the greatest music ever written. But it's not the best Pink Floyd album out there as far as I'm concerned. Coming in at number 1, I gotta go with Wish You Were Here. Just such a perfect album, so tight, not a bad song on here, all killer, no filler, just such a fantastic record, right? All parts of Shine On You Crazy Diamond are fantastic. You have Welcome to the Machine, love the lyrics on that track, Have a Cigar is a lot of fun, and then you have Wish You Were Here, the classic title track. I mean, just absolute perfection here by the band. This was them at their all-time best as far as I'm concerned. Prime Pink Floyd making their best album as far as I'm concerned as well. Just so many great songs on here, and, you know, again, it's a very tight, compact album, but each song really shines, in my opinion, and that's what makes this album so great. Awesome stuff here by the band with Wish You Were Here, my favorite Pink Floyd album of all time, coming in at number 1 on the list. So that wraps up my ranking of Pink Floyd studio albums from worst to best, which should be visible right over here. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel down below, turn on the bell for notifications so you never miss a new upload, and let me know down in the comments below, what are your favorite Pink Floyd studio albums? Do you agree with my list? Do you disagree with my list? And also let me know your least favorite Pink Floyd album as well. I'd be very interested in hearing your opinions. Let me know all that good stuff down in the comments. And until next time, it's the CD guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.